We're back with Kenny Foster. He is somewhere in Middle America. That's the title of his album. I'm out here on the East Coast.
Mhm.
So you mentioned you liked growing up where you did. Tell me
Yeah.
about it.
It's very simple. I describe Joplin, my hometown, as a freestanding suburb. Um, Most suburbs have very near to them, within a half-hour drive, a huge, diverse cultural center where you can see and come up against humanity in a way that doesn't exist in a suburb. We didn't have that, so we were our own cultural center, I guess. Um, which meant that we looked a lot to our art. We looked to our music. We looked to our film. We looked to our television to figure out how we were supposed to be in the world. Television was different then. There were only three or four channels, and we were all kind of watching the same shows. And there was this real uniformity of life that I actually found really comforting, and not in a copy paste repeat way, but in a unifying sort of way. So even if your opinion was different from the mainstream about that episode of Friends that week or whatever it was, or TGIF or whatever, it just um, you had some center from which to dance around your opinions and form more interesting opinion and run them up against someone else. But like, if you've got someone who's really into anime and someone else who only watches daytime soaps, like I don't know, like they're not gonna have that. I don't know how to say that morsel, that sort of like central reference point from which to talk about how they feel about the world. Because I think people are just trying to find their place, and Joplin was a place where everyone kind of felt really centered. It was sweet, and we didn't have to have grandiose things. We didn't have to have um, large sweeping displays of emotion. Really, I guess I don't know. That seems like a weird way to say it, but um, everyone kind of got on and knew what the right thing was without talking about it. Does that make sense? So, like, if you had someone in your school that was different, that was obviously off of the norm, everyone became accepting, almost more so, of that difference, which I know is a unique perspective for a lot of people. But I think because they knew the right thing to do was, man, there was a great amount of empathy. I would feel really out of place if I was such and such. I need to make sure that they don't feel that way. And that's the sense that I got in this strange freestanding suburb. And I think that's because television shows were really apt to do that, and films were really apt to do that, and music was more embracing of the outsider. Yeah, it's a wonderful place, to be honest. I really liked it, and I think in writing somewhere in Middle America, I was trying to recapture that in a way that it probably doesn't even exist now. Do you know what I mean? Like
Oh, I'm not so sure it exists now. I think
it's
there is, thanks to the internet, there are, I mean, it's beautiful the way we can communicate
sure.
across such large boundaries. But I think also thanks to the internet, we can all find our perfect community that thinks exactly like we do,
Sure, sure.
and we don't have to deal with the mainstream world at large anymore and all find some kind of common ground.
Yeah,
And
I think you're absolutely right. And
uh,
and go ahead. Sorry.
no, I got to admit, I'm not someone who wants to deal with the mainstream community. I'm not the one who wants to watch the sitcom that everyone's watching. I want to watch the weird show that takes me to places that I couldn't have imagined.
Sure,
But
sure.
that there is definitely something that's lost when you lose those common reference points, even if ironically enough, losing those common reference points is what makes something like an Americana album do well because we're, we live in we have internet communities where we can focus on the music we like and not what's going on with Harry Styles.
Absolutely, man. No, and I think that's isn't that interesting? It is that yin and that yang. It's that one of my friends said the good, bad, and the ugly are all stapled together. Are on the same, they're on the same piece of paper, and I think about that all the time. It's this. I think it's awesome for us to find our place in the world. And I also think it's important that we have a quote unquote town hall, an area of our lives where we do interact with people that are completely different than us. But the way that we are going into those areas where we have to try to run a society together, um, maybe maybe that muscle has atrophied. Maybe our imagination has escaped us a little bit in that way. And maybe because we don't practice running up against that and having casual conversations, it's always in these town halls where we're trying to figure out, does the school need new this, or does there's these big issues that everyone else has been thinking about for months, but they've never had a conversation with somebody on the other side of the coin about it. And so, how do you emotionally navigate any of these situations to create a society that feels equal, just. I mean, I think the funny thing about democracy at large is that almost no one is perfectly happy with it, and that's sort of its beauty because you had to reach some compromise together, and you're like, well, what I really wanted was waterfall in my bedroom, but like, I don't know, you just can't quite get. It was a terrible analogy, but it was just this, like, you have to figure out we have to sort of figure out what we're working with. And while our imaginations can soar elsewhere, there's also this other thing of like the what is possible and what can be done, and being honest about that with each other. Um, yeah, and I don't know if we have those spaces anymore.
Anyway, we definitely got off on a sidetrack. The song heard before our little sidetrack is called Farmer. Growing up where you lived, you came with that certain set of values. How have those values served you as an adult in the music industry, on the road, all those sorts of things?
Man, I'll be honest. In some ways, I think it's hurt me. Um, I think that the easiest way to get ahead is to sort of be willing to compromise. And I don't mean like in some grandiose moral sense. I think it's just with the control of your message, with the um, creative ideas that you're putting into the world. I think the quickest way ahead, at least through mainstream means, is to show yourself as pliable, or willing to kind of go along with whatever the powers that be need in that moment. Understanding that you yourself is a product is probably your best way forward. And I don't think I've ever seen myself or this exchange between a musician and their listener as anything other than people just trying to find each other. And it's up to someone else if they see magic there and decide to monetize it. That's on them. And as long as the terms are fair, I'm fine. But I can't get to a point where we're using fans and we're figuring out how to, on a very, I don't know, survivalist, you know, mentality, shiny things, try to like attack the things that they don't have control over in order to like will them over to separate their money to spend it on you. Is that like what marketers do? They try to find those little. I want people to willingly part with their time and their efforts and their money because they see something good in the world. And that's asking a lot of somebody, of a consumer maybe, but it's not asking a lot of a friend or a relationship. And so I think I always was really uncomfortable with the idea of creating this hierarchy, um, forgetting that a musician needs an audience, is the first step to like forgetting what this exchange is about. Without an audience, a musician is just toiling in their bedroom, and there's so many of them and so many of us, sometimes. And so I think for me, I holding to the fact that we all are people, that we all have stories that are probably worth telling. These are just mine, and if I can capture that sort of unique, universal, or ubiquity between our stories, then we have a lot more to talk about. We have a lot more places that we can go together, and I guess trying to forge this, this strange unity that I guess I miss. That's my aim, and if I can make a career doing that, man, we've done something here, collectively, as both listeners of music and creators of music, and that's probably as close to utopia as I think we're gonna get.
Building utopia through an Americana album. That is that is the first I've heard that, but
I mean, well, again, a dreamer I've always been.
yes. Uh, would you, in the song Farmer, you talk about sort of using those things that were imparted on you growing up, even
Mm,
in vastly different situations.
totally.
Do you have kids or
Just recently, I have a 9-month-old now. Um, he's probably screaming in the background if you can hear him, but uh, uh, yeah, I'm obsessed with this idea of being on the shoulders of giants. That we're all sort of just standing on top of everything that's been done before us, and I think at its best, that's what we're doing here, just in life generally. But I think that a lot of people decided to jump off the shoulders, or kind of, it's not make their own way, but sort of to try to mix up the rules in ways that didn't actually serve them. Um, and so I was a philosophy major in college as well. And so there's this idea that, look, these things are sort of largely agreed upon. Now, where can we go from here? Um, and I'm all for testing those regular, obviously well known things, because sometimes they're built on absolute crap, but sometimes they're really strong. I love Southern wisdom. I love hillbilly wisdom. That stuff that like almost echoes into your soul when you hear it. You're like, oh, that's really good. That's really true. Um, and I think that sometimes breakdowns in families and communities happen because people forget that. People think that they're lone wolves, lone actors, and no man is an island. And so I think paying homage to all of the things that came before us that we can stand on, are the only ways to, I think, uh, move forward with that. And so I think that's why this area of compromise that we were talking about. There are some things that are totally open for discussion. They're totally open for being changed and being made new and made better, and I am all for that. Especially progress for that sake, emotionally and societal. But I also think that there are some things that are just true no matter what the context is. And I think when people see them and recognize them, they also say the same thing, whether they say it out loud or not. And I think that I think I hope to impart that upon my kids and to anybody else that kind of feels the same way, or like has this inkling, almost mysterious, otherworldly inkling about these ideas that, like, oh no, I think that is true, and I'm not even sure why I think that, but it's true in my own mind.
man, your kid's got a musician and a philosophy major for a father? That's those are going to be some interesting conversations learning how to grow up.
Man, I can't wait, to be honest. I really hope he doesn't go into music or philosophy, but maybe we can push him to some things that are more practical. But I'm not gonna hamper anything that he wants to do, man. He's gonna be smart and he's gonna be well loved, and I think those are the key things. Yeah.
Annie Foster, thanks for a beautiful conversation.
Appreciate it, Trevor. Thanks so much for your time, man. Appreciate it.
I have one little twist every time I have someone on the show. I have them play themselves off sort of by picking a song. Um, Only two rules. Number one, you got to
Okay.
follow my prompt. And number two, it can't be your own.
Okay.
And
Fair.
based on this interview, I'm going to say pick a song that shows that Southern hillbilly wisdom.
Oh, the good stuff. Kenny Chesney.
You got it.